Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Or is it? No, it's almost lunchtime. So anyway, when I got this call to come and speak here, I was kind of wondering what's going to be the agenda and what would be the best thing to actually talk about. Maybe a bit of show of hands. How many of you are actually designers? Okay, how many are developers? Okay, so that's a pretty. Yeah, I think it's pretty okay. Anyway, maybe a bit of introduction. I've been building stuff for the past 15 to 20 years, starting from regular web pages when there were like two, maybe three agencies in Estonia, and all other things that have come after, web apps, mobile apps, some actually native apps that are run on desktop as well. So I have a bit of experience, but of course there's always things to learn. So maybe I'll learn something from you guys today as well. Anyway, get to the point. Is there one right way to actually build a mobile app? When in 2007, Steve Jobs took the stage and brought out the first iPhone, his main goal was to get everyone building actually web apps. Put a little web page inside the phone and it will be okay. As we all know now, 12 years later, that really didn't work out as he planned, because pretty much the first thing that his sentence got was that the first response his sentence got was, but how about we want to build stuff inside the actual phone, native apps, because web inside the phone it had its drawbacks, especially in the beginning. Things have changed, and quite a bit since. And if we want to answer this question, it actually depends, and it depends on a few key points. What are you building? I think that's pretty much the biggest thing you have to decide on. Well, depending on whether you actually work for a client or you are building something for yourself, there's quite a difference. But most of the time, when you have the main idea that what is the thing you're actually doing, then it becomes a lot easier to actually select the way you're going to do it. Now, depending on what you're building, the level or the quality of the user experience you need to deliver might differ from something as simple as a little web page showing some information to a full-fledged application that, I don't know, has user registration and all other kinds of stuff. Now, the level of user experience you have to deliver will decide a lot of the technologies you choose. Now, also the same thing goes for all kinds of features and functionality you put into the app. You have to take into account the actual people building this stuff. Whether you're a company hiring developers or a developer yourself, you have to take into account your skill set. Now, also, budget. You cannot build the biggest app in the world with millions of different features with pocket change. Of course, if you're going to do it alone, you can do it, but might be a bit hard to do it. And based on these five little things that you have to take into account, maybe I'll try to go into a bit of detail in which of these three different, well, maybe just a disclaimer before, when we talk about hybrid, there are actually two kinds of technologies these days available, but I'll get into that a bit later. Now, a web app in its core functionality is just a little web page that you show in a browser, right? Now, it's easy to build. If it works in a browser, it's cheap to maintain, and when it's done, you can start marketing it to anybody you can find. Now, it's also available immediately to all platforms. Well, depending on your level of expertise, you can of course screw it up and build something that doesn't work on anything. But it's easy to fix, as it's a simple piece of software that is run on a server or whatever is your preference. Now, you don't have the mess that comes with code signing the apps, getting it up on the app stores or the Google Play Store, and of course, as I said, it doubles as a web page. You can pretty much pick any web page today, scale it down, put it in a phone browser, and you have a mobile app, right? But on the other hand, you still have issues with this approach. A browser is required. If you, for some reason, delete the browser in your phone or any device, you can't really access it. Now, it's slow. This has become better, but it's still slow because there's always the overhead of the actual browser in the middle, right? Now, bad user experience is something that drives me personally really nuts, because it's you build something and you want it to actually behave in a certain way, but someone somewhere decided that, okay, I don't want to do it like this, I want to do it a bit in a different way, and then you have to start fighting the developers of that actual piece of software who designed it. For example, the latest issue I have with browsers is Chrome decided that quitting Chrome does not work with a symbol key combination anymore. You have to hold it down. It's like, I really would like to, strangle that person who decided that feature, but okay. Anyway, now, since the browser is always in the mix, you have other things that you have to take into account. When you design something that you want to look like, if you, let's say you have to make the web or the application really according to your brand book. Now, some of these elements inside the browser are really hard to design. Then you have to create custom elements for those. Now, with custom elements becomes a really annoying thing that people are used to some functionality, especially if you have accessibility issues in mind. These things are pretty hard and time-consuming to replicate. So using these control elements becomes, either you make it look kind of out of place with system controls, or you have to create something that doesn't really work that well. Now, device-specific features, APIs, not really accessible when you're inside the regular browser. There are some, of course, things you can use, but not that easy. Now, offline mode, okay, yes, newer browsers are a bit more capable in that area, but still not great. when we're talking about really graphic-intensive things, games, big graphics, whatever, browser is really not an option. I think that's why some time ago we actually had Flash, which did a lot of these things. It did work inside a browser, but anyway. Now, and there is no distribution in app stores, which is if you really want to get into that whole ecosystem of apps, it's kind of a no-go. Now, I'm going to talk about hybrid in the middle because it's kind of a step towards one or the other. As I said before, there are two types of hybrids. One of them is the kind of the original hybrid that you had a kind of a container app. Inside that container app, you had a web view, and you pretty much run web code inside that web view. Now, the other kind of hybrid is the best example of the first kind is, let's say, Cordova. Now, the second one is what React Native is doing these days, is that it has kind of the same logic that you still build stuff in web code, in JavaScript, HTML, CSS, whatever, but the actual user interface that comes out of that code is kind of a native thing. Now, this is something that I have personally have the less or the smallest amount of experience with, but I still kind of know how it's actually being built. So I haven't gotten into the details. But now with these hybrid models, you get easier to build and maintain because you have one single code base, right? It's all done in JavaScript or whatever the actual code you're doing at that moment, HTML, CSS right now. It's cheaper to build. If you have a single code base, you pretty much you don't need, two separate developers who have different skill sets as a fully native app. There's no browser needed in that sense, but it still has a browser in the mix if we talk about the original hybrid code. You have access to device capabilities to some level extent, and you get distribution in app stores. Now it seems like this one has all the negative things kind of removed from web apps, but it still has some issues. It's still slower, so kind of puts kind of games and then graphic intensive things out of the picture again. And I think for me personally, the biggest thing is the dependency on a third-party thing in the middle. If that thing breaks, or for example, these days most of these things are usually open sourced. Well, not in all cases, and if that thing starts to, or that company goes under or just stops developing this thing, you're pretty much stuck with it. Either you have to, I don't know, pick up the open source project yourself, or hope that someone else will. Now, the experience part is somewhat better, but it still has a problem, because if you're building something that is a hybrid, either you build it so it's the same for everyone, or you have to move into an area where you start customizing it, and in the end you'll end up with a really big mess with targeting each platform you're building for with inside the code, which becomes a really big mess to handle. And in the end, you pretty much move away from the hybrid model anyway, and you might want to start a native app. Now, fully native apps are, a disclaimer first, I personally prefer native apps all the way, but that's not important at this point. Now, they are a lot faster because they kind of directly speak to the hardware of the device. They are built for the specific platform. Best performance games, all that stuff is usually built for as native apps, right? Now, you have full access to all the APIs and device capabilities. Each user interface part can be customized to your liking. You can do whatever you want as long as it's possible in code. Right now, you get the distribution in app stores as you did with hybrid apps, and you also get the best user interface experience, depending, of course, how much you follow the guidelines of that specific platform. You can, of course, create a mess for each platform you're doing if you don't know what you're doing. Now, of course, there are drawbacks. It is the most expensive to develop. You have different people for different platforms. Of course, maybe you have a superstar programmer who can do stuff for each platform, and I've seen these people as well. For me, that doesn't really work in a sense that if you supposedly know how to do everything, you can't really do everything that well. Now, you have to have different languages. Java, Kotlin, Swift, Objective-C, whatever. And if you're building something really simple, I don't know, just showing some text or whatever you want to do in an app, kind of, you can over-engineer and overuse resources in a really simple way, because this is where the actual research needed to decide which technology use actually comes into play, that you have to think beforehand before actually choosing the technology. Now, what we did in LHV, let's keep in mind that we went native all the way, with a little small disclaimer that we still open certain things in a web view inside the app or in a separate browser, depending on what's the actual content. Because one of the hardest or the most annoying or time-consuming parts is actually formatting text inside in a native app, and doing that when you have all the same content, let's say, available on a web page like we do. Then opening or showing this content inside the native app becomes really tedious to actually build. So we built all the full user interface for both platforms, Android and iOS, in native. Now, there are a few things why we did this. In 2013, when we actually launched the first version of our app, there were pretty much two possibilities. There was jQuery Mobile, which was a utter piece of crap, and there was native. Now, we went the native way because we actually tested out jQuery Mobile. It was slow. It did not work inside the phone as a native app. It still had all the drawbacks of a web page, all the reloading and all that. Now, we built the iOS app first. We did research, and this has been collaborated or done later in many stages from other companies as well, that building iOS first will give you a really good insight into the fact that whether people actually like your app or not. They usually are more into downloading new apps. And especially if you're building something that you want to monetize on, iOS people using iOS actually pay for apps, and that is a fact of life. There's no denying that. We followed with Android a bit later, and we use completely in-house design and user experience design for the app, and we have outsourced some of the coding at some point. At this point, we are building both apps in-house, and I think we well, personally, I think we're doing a pretty good job of it. Now, the biggest challenges we faced is let's say for Android, there are so many different, I think I did a few years ago, there was a nice slide going around on the web that says there's like 23 or something thousand different screen resolution combinations for Android devices. Now try building something for that, right? But the biggest problem with Android devices is that people don't upgrade. People do not upgrade their OS versions. And this is a really bad issue if you have, let's say, security bugs inside the OS. And this is something that is really strange, but, well, not strange, but it's because different vendors, LG, Samsung, whatever, Sony Ericsson, who use Android as their base for their own OSs, they kind of don't offer the upgrades you need for your phone, and but why is that? I really don't know. Now, on the other hand, some of the things when building for Android are a lot simpler. There's no app review, which is a really annoying thing for when you're doing iOS. And testing for Android apps is easier. You just pretty much upload an APK to whatever place you want, and hope for the other person is able to just download it and install on the phones. This is something that was not pretty much doable on iOS. It has become a lot better. The app review times are into, I don't know, 1-2 days. It used to be like 2 weeks. You know, when you build an app and you have to wait for 2 weeks and then get a reply back that sorry, that you're not going to get it approved is pretty annoying. I think, and these were the biggest problems we actually had. So it is 2019 now, 6 years later, and we're still using native code. I don't see any benefits from going into the hybrid model at this time, maybe in the future, but it would mean that we have to pretty much scrap everything we've done so far and then start again. I don't know if that would be a really great idea. Now, maybe show some of the things we did and why we used the native. Now, these things, they look kind of similar, but they still have their platform-specific things taken into account. Now, the designs have been tailored to each specific platform. They work a bit differently, kind of doing the same thing. Where the menu location is placed, either left or coming from the bottom up, or Android has a really big connection to its back button, which is pretty much missing on the whole iOS experience. Which kind of does, when you're used to building stuff on iOS, the back button kind of creates all kinds of issues for you. But if you have a dedicated developer who has first-hand knowledge of the Android ecosystem and how the actual OS works, then this problem kind of goes away, because I think one of the really good things is that if you're building some software, you have to build it, if you're doing it, let's say, build it for yourself as well. It's really hard to build something if you're doing it for someone if you're never going to use it yourself. This is just a simple search. We have now how the keyboards are different on different platforms. It's just a different list view. There's some small graphical differences. One has more rounded corners, the other one has less. This is a system dialog. Now, it kind of looks the same, but it has different I don't know, experience for people who have actually used that specific platform. And I think that's one of the main reasons, that if you build an app for a specific platform, then people want to use it more because it feels right at home. If you create a web page that looks the same for everyone, it's a really weird experience. A few days ago, I was having a back and forth email discussion with an insurance company, and at some point later, I had to fill out their survey about whether I had a good experience. Now, the survey was a web app that was designed, I don't know, maybe sometime in the last 6 years, that had the exact design of iOS, let's say 5, which in 2019 really looks out of place. It would be simple to fix it with just a few CSS stylings and whatnot. But if I was using it on Android, it would look out of place. And now it looks out of place also on iOS. So kind of weird in that sense. We use system controls, how different switches are used on or rendered on different devices. I think this is one of the biggest differences. In Android, you have a dialog in the middle of the screen that has a picker or things you can choose from. iOS always has it, and the bottom where the keyboard also is. Different sharing options, or this is just a simple or a good example how in Android an icon to share is the little dots with lines in between. In iOS, it's the box with the arrow coming out. And these are really device specific, and if someone is used to this on a device, they can pretty much show it. This is something how we show different errors in some cases. And also from the previous one, the sharing thing, these things are system-based, and you get to share whatever is on the app. If you do this with a custom-built thing inside the app, you have to take into account whether you have I don't know, Gmail available or whatever other things that you have to build them all yourself. Now, what you should do as developers: research. Go and think about what are the features you want to build. What is the actual architecture you want to build on? Whether it's maybe it's based on a server or not. Whether you need access to actually online data, you can do it offline. How much money you have. What is your own skill set? Whether you need to hire someone. Maybe you can do it on your own. And what's the timeline? In some cases, if you're doing it for yourself, I don't know, you can do it whenever, but in a lot of cases, you have a specific deadline you have to meet, right? Now, and the key point is, do not choose an approach for the technology only because of that technology. Let's say that you're a really big fan of, I don't know, Swift or Kotlin. Don't go that route, because if you do that, you might end up in a really bad place where you're stuck and you can't really get out of it without rewriting the whole thing now. And most of all, have fun doing it. I think that's why I got into software development and user experience design, because it was fun. When you build or design something that you see makes people, light up or makes them happy. And when we did the LHV's mobile bank, we had people. Well, I think when we redesigned the interface, a bigger redesign, we had a few people complaining in Google Play Store reviews that we should pretty much fire the whole team who did this crap, right? But if you actually use the app, this is where, because they were used to the previous version, and change is always bad because people are not used to it, so they think that it's a lot worse to use. But give it time. And if you actually use it, you see that we've put a lot of thought into this app, and we really want to do something that is usable for everyone, is nice to look at, and actually helps you better to do things in life, especially with your finances. Because one of the mottos I have is that the best banking you can do is no banking at all. Because if things take care of themselves in your pocket, I think that's the best thing you can do. And I think, thank you for listening to me.
Okay, now it's time for the questions again. You can still ask questions right now as well on ask.etuke.ee. But the first one is, what peculiarities are in developing front end for a bank?
What peculiarities? That's a good question. I'm not sure if there are any really specific things. Maybe, well, of course, security is a big thing. If you're building a game that runs only on your own device and doesn't really, access any online data or anything, you don't have to think about security pretty much at all, right? But if you're building something that is supposed to give people trust that this app will work, it will guard or safeguard your money, then I think that is something that is a bit different from other applications. But all in all, I think it's pretty much the same. There are no really big differences.
Do you check other bank apps to get new ideas and change your own?
I think that's a funny way or a funny thing to mention, because since we came out with our apps, somehow all other banks are starting to make their apps look like ours. So no. Actually, I'm lying. We take other banks and we look at their apps and then try to do better. So in that sense, yes, we take hints from others.
What do you think, in which direction current app development trend is going? To hybrids or native?
As I said, it depends. If you're building games, I don't think hybrid is anywhere near. I don't know. It's probably not even possible or not feasible to build something in a hybrid model if you're building games. But of course, game platforms have, or gaming software has their own hybrid versions as well. You can build games for or different platforms with Unity and whatnot. But when it comes to regular apps, or I don't know, I think it's still an open question, because mostly people are pushing towards the hybrid model. But I've also seen that if you build the hybrid model, or according to the hybrid model, people kind of don't really want to use the app. So there's a big gap. And but I think in the future, maybe, I don't know, in 10 years, we'll see more people actually using hybrid than native when it comes to, I don't know, whatever the biggest thing is right now.
How do you test your mobile apps?
How do we test our mobile apps? We do human testing, because we use these apps daily. I use them personally. I think when I look at the list of people in-house testing list of people actually opening the app, there's like, I don't know, someone opens the app 20 times and 30 times, and I have like 3,050 times. So, but we do a lot of human testing, and we have also some unit tests running somewhere. But mostly we do it by hand.
But if we're talking about apps on Android and iOS, is there an impact on budget as well, where when you're developing like them parallel? Is the cost double, or can you reuse a lot of it?
We haven't, well, because we haven't actually used the hybrid model in-house ever, then we don't know what would be the difference. But so far, from what I've learned from different research done on the web, the fully native is, of course, more expensive than hybrid, but it's not double. It's maybe, I don't know, 1.2. So if you're really stretched for money, then the hybrid model, of course, makes a lot of sense. But if you're already doing something with a native app, then starting over from a hybrid model will not get you, a really great app with half the money.
Okay. Where does Flutter stand in the current scene?
Sorry? What?
Where does Flutter stand in the current scene?
I don't know. Really don't know.
How long did it take to build the first version of the mobile app?
First version of the mobile app, it kind of depends. If we take into account the time it actually took for the backend services to arrive or be built, then, I don't know, maybe 6 months. If we don't take that into account, then I'd say about a month. The front end is really lightweight and simple to actually build in iOS.
Okay. Which software architecture are you using on the mobile apps, both on Android and iOS?
iOS, we used Objective-C in the beginning because at that point in time it was the only option. We've now converted the app to Swift. On Android we use Java, and thinking about moving to Kotlin in the future, or creating some kind of a hybrid of those two in somewhere in the middle. When it comes to different APIs or frameworks, we try to use as much as possible or build ourselves as much as possible, because my personal experience with using different, especially open source frameworks, is that first you see that, okay, it kind of does what you're looking for, then you put it inside your app, and then you start customizing it to the point that it would have been actually easier to build it. But this only applies to really small things, because I think that's a really big problem with today's software development, is that people take on dependencies without actually thinking what they're doing. If you want to build a simple web app or web page, you don't have to pull down the whole GitHub to actually build it. You can use, just a text editor on an open HTML page and write it. But yeah, we use as much as little as possible of different frameworks.
One second. There's so many questions right now. What prototyping software do you use?
Prototyping. That's a good question. Because we do most of the stuff in-house, we use Sketch as a design tool, and I think we do a lot of actual testing or things inside the app already. We don't really have a specific prototype phase in the middle, because, I kind of think that you can create a really great product by using common sense, and you don't have to test out every little, scenario or version of the user experience.
How careful are you when you're using third-party libraries when building the banking app?
Third-party library, I think that's something I kind of already answered, but since we are building something that is inside the bank and we have to be really sure about the implications. I think that's one of the reasons as well why we really don't use too many third-party things inside the app. And if we do use some open source parts, then we kind of go through the code a bit to see whether they're doing something nasty that they shouldn't be doing.
If a solo web developer wants to publish an app for both platforms, which direction should she or he take?
Solo web developer. I have to answer that question with a question that what app would you like to build? If you want to build, I don't know, the next Facebook, and you want to test out whether it works on people, then by all means go with a web or a hybrid model. If you want to build something that is really great for one platform, you can do that as well. There is no right or wrong way depending. It really depends on what's your actual app doing. As I build games as well on my free time, I've always gone in the native direction myself, but if I had to build a really simple, I don't know, let's say a chat client, I might go with the hybrid model because it would be available pretty much instantly for both platforms. It has a lot of text rendering, which is a pain in the ass to do in native, and so it really depends on the app.
Where do JavaScript-based libraries like Vue Native and React Native fall in these categories? What are your opinions on those?
I think they're great in a sense that you get to build. If you're already a web developer and you know to build or how to build web pages and you're really handy at it, then by all means go for it. It's they open up the app development or the app store for a lot of people, because there are a lot of different people who actually know how to build web pages and build things in JavaScript, HTML, whatever the less or CSS or whatever the fanciest keyword is for the day. But well, there is no but. I think they're great. If you want to build and you know how to build something in that specific language, then go for it. It's all fun and games if you know how to do it. But just selecting React or Vue because it's the coolest new technology, I think that's like the worst decision you can do if you really want, because you might end up in a place where you don't want to be and you have to rewrite everything because you can't do a lot of stuff in that.
What's the next big feature on your app?
Next big feature? I'm not sure if I can actually say that, but you have to download it and see. We're gonna add stuff, a lot of stuff. Well, what we like to do is we like to bring out features kind of slowly. We don't really want to, put 100 things at once in and then try to market it as like the biggest thing since sliced bread. We bring out stuff gradually. We try to at least release a bigger or a milestone release every 3 months. It's been a bit longer this time, but good things take time.
Are NFC payments coming anytime soon?
NFC payments. Now, this is something I really don't know, because NFC payments are kind of a can of worms, because on one hand, you have Android, which has a open platform that you can do anything with NFC payments or the NFC chip, right? On the other hand, you have iOS, which is really closed in that sense. So the current decision is that if we cannot do it in a great way for both platforms, we're not going to do it in that way, but let's see. I'm not going to say anything when or if we can come out with NFC payments, but yes, I would like to have NFC payments, of course. So, but it takes a bit of time.
Since I don't have any questions here anymore, but does anyone want to ask any questions directly? I have a microphone for you. No? Okay, well then, thank you. Thank you very much.